Hate speech should be protected under the First Amendment, and here's why. If free speech wasn't protected, accusations of censorship by the government would ensue, which would stray this country farther away from democracy. The free marketplace of ideas theory by John Mill in 1859 states that the free competition of ideas in society leads to agreed-upon truths and facts. This theory helped enhance the American values of democracy and freedom. Censorship would then cause a slippery slope into the government being able to ban ideas they don't like. If this was in place, how would Black Lives Matter protesters be able to relay their messages? In the 1972 free speech case, Healy v. James, Justice Blackmun stated, "The freedoms guaranteed by the First Amendment must be accorded to the ideas we hate, or sooner or later they will be denied to the ideas we cherish." The First Amendment and free speech only pertain to what the government can do and not isolated cases. The Supreme Court has ruled many times that hate speech is protected under the First Amendment. A recent example of this is Mattel v. Tam, 2017, where it was ruled that the government couldn't ban expression because it was offensive, which reaffirmed that legally, hate speech can't be prosecuted. Lastly, hate speech is too broad of a term to be regulated. No matter how hateful speech can get, we legally can't discriminate against someone's point of view.
The First Amendment covers freedom of religion, freedom of press, freedom of petition, freedom of assembly, and freedom of speech. The definition of freedom of speech is the right to express any opinions without censorship or restraint. However, the definition of hate speech is any form of expression through which speakers intend to vilify, humiliate, or incite hatred against a group or a class of persons on the basis of race, religion, sexual orientation, skin color, gender, ethnicity, disability, or national origin. According to the American Library Association, hate speech can only be criminalized when it directly incites immediate criminal activity or consists of specific threats of violence targeted against a person or group. This itself is called hate crime. A hate crime is a criminal offense against a person or property motivated in a whole or in part by an offender's bias against a race, religion, disability, sexual orientation, ethnicity, gender, or gender identity. This example of hate crime was presented in our very own nation on January 6th, when Trump supporters stormed the Capitol because they were fueled by the hate speech and derogatory language of our former president. How can we protect something that shows immediate danger to us as a society?
Though the January 6th attack is a model example of hate speech not being able to be protected under the First Amendment, most of the time, finding an imminent violent act, which is what is needed to prosecute hate speech under the First Amendment, is hard to find, as seen in the Brandenburg v. Ohio case, which set the precedent involving a KKK member's hateful speech. Hate crimes were created as punishable laws outside of the First Amendment. There should be laws further created to protect people from hate speech, but not under the First Amendment. The First Amendment states that Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech, meaning the government can't legally do anything to a person based on the things they say. If the United States were to adopt this idea of the government being able to censor messages that don't directly incite violence, it can cause a slippery slope. The government may be able to censor criticism of the government, which is a direct violation of our democracy. They may also interpret their own views of hate speech that could put minorities speaking against white supremacy in danger. The First Amendment was written when the United States decided that they wouldn't censor its people like their previous rulers did to them. Regulating hate speech under the First Amendment is in direct opposition to democracy, which is what this country was built upon. The First Amendment does allow for racist speech to be heard, but it also allows for speech of racial justice to be heard. The First Amendment allows for both sides to be heard and for the people of this country to understand the state that it's in.
You say that hate speech falls under the First Amendment. You said that, right? However, in the Supreme Court's decision in the Sender versus Phelps case, they stated that hate speech can be criminalized when it incites violence. So it's not fully protected. It should not be protected because it can cause people their lives. Currently, we face that in America and around the world. Asian Americans and Asians are facing very cruel and hateful actions. They're dying and getting beaten because of the hateful speech of the former president of the United States. Trump incited violence against Asian Americans and Asians because he blames the coronavirus on them. He put that label upon them. The same way he has put the label of thugs, criminal rapists against Hispanics, Latinos, and African Americans. So we can't fully support something that has led to the death of hundreds and thousands of people.
Before closing out my argument, I'd like to address my opposition. I never said that hate speech is fully protected under the First Amendment. There is one special circumstance in which hate speech can be prosecuted, which I acknowledge. There is no clear and easy way to prove that hateful speech leads to travesties unless it is imminent. There have been multiple court cases that have upheld that hate speech is protected under the First Amendment because of possible infringement on society's individual rights. Hate speech, though an ugly part of our society, is part of our democracy. If society continued to closely regulate freedoms of racial, LGBTQ, and religious groups, they would not have gotten this far in society. It gives people the right to express their inherent freedom no matter how ugly the rhetoric is. Freedom of speech has always had a good side and a bad side. From fears of censorship, free thought in society, and the ability of the term hate speech to be subjective, that means that hate speech should be protected under the First Amendment.
Hate speech should not be protected by the First Amendment because the First Amendment protects our rights, liberties, and freedoms. Hate speech itself is a freedom. However, this freedom incites violence, discrimination, and chaos. So how can we support something that goes against our freedoms as individuals, our rights as individuals? So therefore, I believe that hate speech and the First Amendment, the freedom of speech, are two totally separate things. Yes, you have the freedom to say this, but do you have the freedom? Do you have the knowledge to know that your words have consequences? You will face consequences with hate speech. The question is, are you ready for them?